So let's move on. Here is an interesting session. From reactive to predictive, building the next generation of cloud security operations. So to facilitate this discussion, I call upon Varun Tripathi, SE Lead APAC at Orca Security, along with his team to get started with this discussion. Welcome aboard.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I have two gentlemen here with me. Anvesh, who is the security leader from the Jungly Games, and Pradeep is the engineering manager from the Grow. So we will try to talk about the cloud, how we are building, what we are building, what's the industry thought about it, and we will hear the thoughts from the team that what all things are are there from a leadership point of view that what these people are thinking and building of, right? So we have given the topic of reactive to predictive and building the next generation of cloud security operations. So we all see about the SOC. We have always heard about the security operations center. The moment we see the big screens comes into the mind, a lot of people are sitting there watching in these screens. So for the cloud, is it the same, the traditional approach, or we have something new which is there in the mind of our global leaders who are living everything and anything in the cloud? And that's where I think we have Anvesh and Pradeep to put the thoughts about it. What is the road ahead for the cloud security in terms of being reactive to reactive, the predictive part? So yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having us. I know it is the second session after the lunch, a bit of dizziness, so we'll try to make it more interactive, right? And we will have more time for the Q&A because I see cloud AI is going in back and forth. So we'll try to collaborate on all those terminologies, and we'll have the times for the Q&A. If these are the topics which excites us, we can always have the Q&A at the last, So Anvesh, your thoughts on from the what we are looking at, what is the current problem, what we are seeing with the traditional approach, where when we are talking about the next-gen cloud security versus the traditional cloud security operations. What is the thing we are looking at in terms of what's missing, what we are doing, what we can do differently?
Yeah. See, again, first, thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be with my peers. And guys, I think with respect to traditional security operations, as you know, the network deployment models have changed over the last decade, right, in a significant way, right? That today's security operations are mostly built for the yester world, right? Basically, we had a perimeter, right? There was a finite perimeter, whereas all the data center was protected by that firewall, and everything outside was untrusted, and everything outside was untrusted, and everything inside was trusted, right? But in today's world, almost every business I know is purely digital native, right? And it has shifted the whole paradigm. I think we have done enough of research. There's been heavy research on EDR systems, on data center systems, and all, but any business that you take today is purely digital native, right? It's highly possible for attacks to completely start in the cloud and end in the cloud, right? And how is cloud today? Cloud is, it's going by leaps and bounds, right? 5 years before, no one would have even heard Kubernetes, right? But most of the infrastructures are purely running on managed Kubernetes nowadays, right? And the cloud complexity has gone to such a level that it's purely ephemeral as well, right? So in some cases, if you're not properly architecting your log infrastructure, it's highly possible the logs are even gone, right? The attacker would come and go, and the attackers even have better playbooks than our SOC, because they just have to execute everything. From recon to attack to data exfiltration, everything happens in minutes, right? So we have to fundamentally rethink how we do security operations. It's no longer enough to think in the age-old way of having a human look at logs and all, but we have to increasingly leverage various technologies to ensure we go more into detection engineering. So that's my major point which I wanted to share with my peers today is we have to heavily invest in detection engineering, get more into, leverage AI-assisted SOC, right? Again, I don't think so we are at a place where AI can replace SOC, but AI-assisted SOC definitely there, and I think we have to go towards more of detection engineering. That's my take.
Perfect. Thank you, Anvesh. So, few things, which I think I already have from his thing is that the complexity part of the cloud and the SOC, it's absolutely complex. We don't know how many things we are spinning up in the cloud, and at the very next time, how many things are being deleted. And that's where the generative AI, that's where the visibility comes in picture, and that's what I think Anvesh is saying about the detection engineering. Because if I need to stop something, first and foremost thing is to identify the things, and that's where the detection engineering, a new terminology is being used in the market now with the detection part, that now what all things are there, how I can mitigate the risk, what is there as part of the shadow APIs or a ghost asset, or the assets which is not being used, it's neglected, nobody is there, it's orphaned assets. And in cloud we see a lot of things, and that's what the trend is going on with the digital native part, that we spin up things, we delete things, but it is not deleted from the inventory, it is still there in the cloud. And as a SOC, as a security operations team, we should be looking at those things, because if those are orphaned and somebody take the hand of those, then we may be in a big trouble, because that's how the crypto mining attacks are happening. People are utilizing containers, Kubernetes, which Anvesh talks about. Because if you don't have that detection mechanism available there, where you are not looking at actively, people are utilizing your platform. You are paying a bill, and they are printing the cryptos there, by doing the mining part. So from the take, about the what's the traditional problem, because EDRs. So I'll summarize it as the agents, right? Be it it's EDR, NDR, XDR, all the new terminologies are there. So these has been there for the ages. At least I remember from 1990s, they have been there from the days of the viruses, and then the antiviruses, and then it keep evolving, right? Now in the cloud, being very dynamic, agents cannot fulfill that requirement. So that's where we have already done a lot of research in the agent part. Now it is a time to look at the things which can be as dynamic as cloud, where you can just plug in and get the relevance, the ROI or the relevance data facts, the detection facts out there in the morning, and you start acting on those detections to make sure nothing is being missed. Because with the agent part, wherever I have a gatekeeper, I'm seeing all those things, but where it is not there, it is completely blind for us. So that's the cloud complexity is adding into these agent parts, and then again with the thoughts of the detection, engineering or a detection mechanism, we are falling short of, because of the agent. So we need something on the cloud or on the next gen SOC, which is not totally dependent on the agent. It doesn't mean that, you have to get rid of all the agents. Agents have their own purpose to solve, but can I only depend on the agents? The current and the modern answer is no. There are other ways using which we can be in a curve, in a top of the curve, to identify things and see it in a 360 degree as a bird's eye view, right? So that's the, I think, what I have, what I can summarize from Anvesh's part, that, okay, when we talk about the traditional problem, these are the traditional problem, because when we talk in defense in depth, or, back in data center, we had an opportunity where we can use the key and locks, that nobody else can go inside, only the authorized people will go. But in the cloud, that parameter is a galaxy. We don't know, what is the end of that, until unless you put that detection mechanism, that again, okay, this is my boundary, this is where I need to put defense in depth. So that particular thing is important for the digital native and the transformation what is happening in the industry, be it it's banking or the digital native, any organization who are into the cloud. I think this is something, the parameter is becoming challenge. It's uncharted territory for all the customers, who are there in the consuming the cloud, to make sure that we are targeting or charting that territory without affecting day-to-day operations. Because if I'm affecting day-to-day operations, then there is no use for me to be into this space where I'm talking about the new SOC, because SOC is supposed to help us operationalize even in a better way and in a more efficient and a faster way. It's so I think that is something what we are looking at from a traditional security problems and the cloud security problems in the SOC part. And I'll come back to you, Anvesh, on that, but before that, I would like to pass the mic to Pradeep. And so Pradeep, we talked about the traditional security problems, right? Now, if I have to build a new SOC, a next-gen SOC, where I'm talking about from a reactive to predictive analysis of the threats, of the risk which is there in the cloud, what would be the principles of the next-gen cloud SOC, from your point of view?
Good afternoon, all. I mean, when we talk about traditional SOC, like how Anvesh and Varun were briefing, right? All we were looking is a lot of alerts, right? There was a research also done on the SOC analyst, if you know, right? One of the major things that the SOC analysts have always felt is the alert fatigue, right? They do not want that, right? And the best way to kind of look at that is to kind of how to reduce those alerts, right? And convert those alerts to actionable risks, right? And that is what the next gen SOC will be looking at, right? So, like if you know, right, there is a vulnerability scanner, which if you run a vulnerability scanner, it gives you 10,000 vulnerabilities, right? You have a CSPM solution. If you run that, it gives you 1,000 vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, right? And if you just double click on that, if you look into only IAM, it tells you 100 IAM related or overly permissive IAM roles, right? Now, SOC analyst, like my SOC analyst, if he starts looking into that, he will be obviously perplexed. Like he's like, what to pick, right? And that's been the traditional SOC in the past, right? Like now, what people are looking at is more of attack path, right? I was just briefing to my friend Sumant, right? Like people get a lot of these alerts nowadays. Now, what we actually have to do is, okay, let's say there is this, let's say I'll take an example of the alerts, right? For example, let's you, a tooling gave you an alert of, there is a misconfigured bucket. Okay, there is a bucket, storage bucket, which has a PII in it. Okay, and that is an alert for a SOC analyst. There is one more alert, which says something like, there is this virtual machine, which has a known CV, right? And there is one more alert, which says that there is this IAM role, which is overly permissive. Right? Now a SOC analyst who is looking at it, these are all three different alerts, and they are of no much of a critical alert, not much of a critical alert. But if a tool or a next-gen SOC solution, right, which actually correlates all these things and tells you that, okay, there is this VM which has a known CVE, an attacker can exploit that and get into the system. Now that VM has an instance, it has a role that is overly permissive, which is admin privilege. And with that admin privilege, that person can get into a bucket which has sensitive PII, right? If a next-gen SOC is able to kind of figure out this attack path, right, then my SOC analyst will not be looking into thousands of alerts. He'll be looking into that one attack path that takes down the company, right? The next-gen SOC should be solving these kind of problems rather than just looking into the alerts.
Thanks, Pradeep, for that. So, Pradeep talks about the attack path, and that is more of a tech term, and he's from the tech, so he always speaks tech. I'll try to put it in a bit of normal language. When we talk about the attack path, what Pradeep said, it is the context-rich information. So rather than having 6 different alerts in siloed areas, in a next-gen modern SOC from which we are discussing here, we should have a place where it tells us that how a attack or the cyber threat actor will perform the attack from one place and then move to what. That context has to be there. So I think what Pradeep took an example of S3 bucket and something. So now there's a virtual machine which is connected to S3 bucket through the role. Now in that S3 bucket, I have a PII. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes super important because there is the business data. And that information is coming with the context. So, in the next-gen SOC, rather than seeing as the log, which Anvesh also talked about, that just looking at the logs is not going to help, because we need to have that context, that why the operations team, have to work on this specific alert rather than anything else. Because it shows you the path that if I'm not stopping it here, it is going where, and what is the impact I as an organization will have. So that is something which I think, Pradeep, from the context-rich intelligence point of view, that in the next gen SOC, we should have a context-rich intelligence platforms where all those things are visible to all the SOC analysts. They don't have to go and do the deep research again to get the context out of it. It should be there. So by seeing it, I can operationalize it in a better way, in a faster way, right? We do, Pradeep did talk about the visibility part. That's the unified visibility. He talked about multiple aspects, the S3 buckets, the IAM role, the virtual machines. Now, how can we see those attack path if I don't have the single visibility, visibility in one single place in a unified way? So eventually, first I will have the unified visibility, which again adds up to the detection engineering part, which Anvesh was telling, and then using that unified visibility, we have to build the context-rich intelligence on those risks which has been identified by the different tools, which are present for me to do the built-in security for the cloud, right? However, Pradeep, in the cloud, I like to have one more thought about the shift left, right? A big buzzword on the application security, that shift left and shift right. So, what do you think? What is going to be the area or the phase where we are looking up the DevOps, at the SecOps? So, we always talk about the DevSecOps in the cloud. When we talk about the cloud, we always say the first is development, then the security, and then the operation, right? I say DevSec, and then the SecSec, and then the OpSec, because security is common for everybody. So, can I have some thoughts on the DevSecOps part, which is I think the integral part of the cloud SOC, because in the cloud you have a lot of developers whom nobody can control, right? They have their timelines. Using in those timelines, they have to deliver the applications, all those things. And as a security, so if I'm a security analyst, my job is to make sure that no surprises are coming to me. As the developer, I need to push the application. And the operation says, I don't need more alerts. So how are we tackling those? What's your thought, that how we can tackle those things when we are trying to build the next gen SOC?
So when it comes to application security, right, like we are majorly talking about the code part, right? If you are picking just code security, the shift left and shift right, right? I think shift left is something that all of us might have already heard, right? Like everybody talks about, we have to implement shift left. The shift left is nothing but, with respect to code security, it's more like how do you prevent insecure code entering your production system? That's as simple as that shift left, right? And shift right is, let's say, if something happens, and if the vulnerability or insecure code sneaks in, right? Now, how do you respond to such threats? That talks about shift right, right? I think shift left is majorly the preventive or proactive approach, and shift right is how do you respond to it, and reactively how do you respond it faster, right? That's what talks about the shift right. Now, shift left, there are multiple ways to do it, right? Whenever somebody is writing a code, right? How quickly you can identify insecurities in that code, right? How do you identify secret that is hard-coded in the code? How do you identify libraries that are vulnerable, right? How do you identify the licenses and compliances that your company is using, which are unauthorized, right? So how do you identify these all things at the initial phase? Talks about the shift left, right? And when you talk about shift right, it's more like, okay, let's say the code is already written, it's already deployed in a workload, right? Now, how the workload is behaving, right? If any anomalous behavior is exhibited by a workload, how do you identify it? How do you isolate that workload? And then how do you respond to that workload? That talks about the shift right, right? Now, both of them are very important, right? Shift left is very important because it's a proactive approach. And shift right is very important because it talks about resilience, right? It's similar to that of car, right? Like when you are planning to buy a car, you will obviously see the crash test score, right? Like how solid the build is, right? But you will not forget to kind of look at the airbags that are present in the car, right? That is also very important, right? So that's the analogy of shift left and shift right. And automation plays a very key role here, because you cannot start looking into every line of code which has vulnerabilities, or every line of code that has hard-coded secret in it, right? So there are toolings which are available which you can put it at the initial phases of the CI/CD, which helps you to identify hard-coded secrets, misconfigured code or ill-written code, or the libraries with vulnerabilities. And once they are deployed on the workload, now you have to look into the reactive side of it. For example, there is this workload, right, which is talking to a different site altogether, and it is trying to download something from that, right? It's a anomalous behavior, right? Shift right talks about that, right? Something like this. There is this Lambda function, right, and it is talking to one of the IP addresses at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning. That's a completely anomalous behavior, right? And that, if you have a solution which identifies that, if that a solution tells you that this is an anomalous behavior and your workload needs to be protected, and it provides you a runtime protection, and that's the solution that we are talking about, and that is the way forward.
Thanks, Pradeep. Thanks for that. So that is the important aspect of the entire cloud, the complete SDLC phase, where we are talking about the creation and then the implementation of those things. And as part of the SOC, again, if we are missing on the creation part and just looking at the deployed stuff, is going to leave us that gap, which is, so, from my point of view, again, if I have to summarize before we open the floor for the audience. So, from my point of view, the road ahead for the next gen SOC is, it is going to open, the SOC will resemble a new counter, from a cloud point of view, from a digital native point of view, right? Where we should have the unified intelligence, where we can help and ease the operations what the SOC team or the security team is looking at. Again, AI-driven recommendation, not the remediation I'm saying the recommendation, because again, there is a lot of growth on the area of growth in their AI. I still, know that's my view that, I just cannot whole and solely rely on the AI to do the remediation part. There is always a human intelligence which plays a vital role on rectifying the things. And when we talk about the shift left and the shift right, that is a culture which I think as a SOC, as a modern SOC, we have to adopt, that the security should be available in every part of the application life cycle, or in the cloud security life cycle, when be it's a developer. So we should be able to speak the developer language without affecting their work. We should be able to impose the security, and at the same time, we should not give too much of an alert and a fatigue to the operations team, where they come and say that, no, okay, you tell me which one to pick first. It's their job to tell us that, okay, we have fixed these many things, but it should not be otherwise. Then that, you have given me 10,000 of the alert. Now which one to pick first, right? So the removal of the alert fatigue will come from the unified intelligence and the visibility. So as part of the, from our point of view, if I summarize both the gentlemen's thought, the unified visibility, the detection engineering, which is again to identify the risks which are present, then from shift left to right, everything in the cloud space from the SDLC point of view has to be the part of this SOC, right? So I think that is something we see, and as per the timing, we are right around the corner. So again, I thank you so much, Pradeep and Anvesh, for that discussion and the thoughts. But if there are any queries, any questions which you think we can help you address, or feel free to let us know. If there is something which is in your thought which we haven't added as, and you think as part of this SOC, next gen SOC, we should have it as a pointers. Anything which we missed and you folks wants to add?
So one more thing is, I've been following a lot of startups nowadays, and they are getting into the SOC part of it. With the AI coming in, right, a lot of people are trying to solve the SOC problems, right? And all the problems that Anvesh talked, I was talking and Varun were talking, right? The traditional SOC has been different. Now, within an hour, like how Anvesh was saying, right? It's all Kubernetes, right? A lot of pods get spun up, right? Before the alert even reaches the security analyst, right? That pod is already down, right? Like, how do you quickly look into that? How do you automated remediation? How do you employ that? That creates a difference, and that's the next generation SOC that we're talking about.
Yeah, the next 2 to 3 years, I think there's a huge scope of innovation. In fact, I'm pushing all my cloud vendors, like, what are you going to do for me, right? Because how are you going to solve this, the new paradigm that we are seeing right now? And I believe there's a whole new code to cloud, facilities which are coming from all the cloud vendors today, which is making us easy to identify, for any new cloud vulnerability, what is the exact application security code which is responsible for it. I've still seen, I think there's still scope of improvement. I think, I believe the next 2 to 3 years are very critical, and we're going to see a lot of advancements there.
Makes sense. All right. So again, thank you so much for being an amazing audience and listening us for last 25 minutes. I know it's not easy to sit there and listen, so thank you so much. You have been an amazing audience. And thank you so much, Anvesh and Pradeep, for coming in and sharing this stage with me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So what an insightful discussion, right? So from here we could see that cloud security is always, it clearly shows us it's always a proactive rather than a reactive. And thank you so much, Orca security team, for being here and enlightening this crowd. Just a moment of appreciation.